Kaysen, were you aware of this YouTube channel called Dansg08?
Never heard of him. What are you talking
Never heard of him. Did you know that he made a video about this section of Final Fantasy X where you go through the ice and the fact that you're actually on Sin's back?
How would I know about this? Somebody would have had to have told me. I don't get where you're going.
I certainly am disappointed in our audience for not having told us that this treasure trove of a video online existed.
I think I know the problem.
We could have used it for a reference.
I don't think they told us enough times.
I don't think they told us enough.
I think that's the issue.
I think they didn't tell us enough times. Fortunately, despite the failing of our audience to inform us, I have contacted Dansg08.
Oh, no way.
And he's going to join us to talk about this portion. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name's Mike.
My name's Kaysen.
We left off after the snowmobile ride with Lulu.
Yeah.
Which could have been Riku, or could have been Kimari, or could have been Auron.
It was with Lulu for me.
Actually, even all the way back into Guadalajara, the conversations you have with Lulu about Yuna getting married, those can be Riku as well. I don't know if you've seen those scenes. That's another one where they can switch them out based on the whole hidden affection mechanic.
Interesting.
If you haven't seen those, maybe we'll play them now, or maybe we'll put them in the description. I don't know. Something will be decided later on that. Okay. Anyway, we're arriving at Macalania Temple now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this column or like path of ice that like leads up to
it's super cool
door. Yeah.
And so it's kind of like elevated a little bit. The Macalania Temple, it looks a little bit like the airship that we find later on. It's funny.
Oh, I didn't even take notice of that.
Just the general look of it kind of looks like a Jabba the Hutt kind of thing, but it kind of gets a little skinnier towards the bottom, and it's got these things on the top.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I couldn't really figure anything out from the back, but all these temples look so unique. They look so different.
Does it have purple and gold coloring to it?
I don't think it had that. I remember something more like blue and brown.
I can't see it in my mind right
It's more like blue and brown or something like that.
We're going to talk about the coloring of the airship in a little bit.
Yeah.
The door attendant of the temple tries to keep Riku out and is surprised to learn that she's a guardian. I think Riku says, I've decided to be Yuna's guardian now, and that's all I want. And then Auron says, and that's all one needs to be a guardian. I question that.
It's just a little weird given what we've seen in the past. I did see somebody comment on this specifically saying that it's not Yevon the church that will punish you if somebody who's not a guardian enters. It is the faith themselves. Oh. Or it is the faith will withhold the summon from the summoner if a non-guardian's there. Now, how they know how any of this works, I have no idea. I have no idea how any enforcement mechanism exists or could possibly exist, or if it's ever happened before.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there has to be some precedent for it if people believe that that's what's going to happen. But like, why do they? Like, when has this?
I don't know. See, that's the question. And then Yevon's trying to enforce it, but it's like, oh, they can't enforce it. Like, she walks right past them into the temple.
Yeah.
And they're like, so the organization's powerless. They're not the ones enforcing the rule, yet it's a rule. So it's like, is it the faith? I don't know.
And I don't know if all it takes to be a guardian is to just want to be one.
I want to be a freaking guardian.
I don't know. There's just something about that doesn't feel like well enough explained.
Yeah, I don't know if I accept that.
Or like convincing from from the church's standpoint that they would just be, oh, they said she wants to be a guardian, so I guess she's a guardian. Tidus decided to be a guardian, so he's a guardian now, so you can come in. Whereas before it was it's so taboo. Like you cannot enter. It's like a big deal. There's not a lot of enforcement going on with this on the church's side. And there doesn't seem to be much of a process to actually qualifying to be a guardian in place.
Yeah.
No ordination, no vetting process, nothing.
Yeah.
They just say, I want to be a guardian. Cool, you're a guardian as long as the summoner accepts that. I don't know. Seems not well enough explained to me.
I don't know about that. I wonder about that too.
I think Shalinda is in there. She gets pissed.
Oh yeah, she's there.
If you lied to her about Yuna getting married or not. She's like, you shouldn't tell stories or lie.
But it's like, no, she isn't getting married still because...
Yeah.
And that's why we're kind of like rushing over there because we know something's up, right?
Mm-hmm. And then this is where I think one of the like temple worker people, they discover Jiskel's sphere in Yuna's belongings. She's like, oh my gosh, Lord Jiskel. And then the whole party goes in there and watches and learns that Seymour killed his father. Mm-hmm. Jiskel essentially admits to that and that Yuna's in more trouble than maybe they even realized.
Yeah. Oren picks up pretty quickly what Yuna wanted.
Yes.
And he's just like, oh, I get what she's doing. This is a bad idea.
Well, it's actually a really, really bad idea when you hear it come from her mouth. It's just like,
when she explains
are you serious that you thought that was going to... Anyway, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting that Jiskel says in the Sphere recording that he has accepted his death as a punishment for his deeds. Like he says, I will accept this out loud, yet he still came back from the far plane.
Right, so he hasn't actually accepted. So he was just lying when he said he accepted it.
It's also possible he meant it, but then like as it all went down and that there was not really any resolution to this problem with his son, it's like he saw the need or whatever and maybe tried to come back. But anyways, for those of you who haven't seen the previous episode where or the 2 episodes ago, I think, where we talked about like the rules behind how death in this world works.
Right.
If you die and you have not like accepted your death in life, you have to be sent by a summoner to the far plane, or else you remain in the world as a fiend.
Right.
But if you have accepted your death in life, then you'll just go to the far plane. That's kind of the
clearly
rule.
he recorded this little home video before he had actually died. It's easy to say, I shall accept my death. And then when your son actually murders you, it's like, I don't think this is right. And before you know it, you're a fiend.
This isn't quite... I have not resolved this in quite the way I had hoped.
Exactly. Or maybe it's just that other people should know about it, that his grudge wasn't the acceptance of his own death or not, but his grudge is something more along the lines of people need to know about this. It's not right that this happened, but people don't know about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he was able to come back.
Strangely enough, his like ghostly fiend self is the one who delivered the sphere to Yuna in the first place.
Himself.
So it could be that he wasn't trying to like come back out into the world. He was trying to just deliver a single message to somebody so that people could know what happened.
Sure.
And then he was cool with being sent after that, you know.
Right.
So
I think that makes sense. And he says, "Stop my son."
Yes. And Waka gets super conflicted about this because now he knows he's going to have to confront a Maester of Yevon. He's like, "What, dude? I can't do that." You know. Oren warns him basically as they're going into that room just outside of where she prays to the faith, that they're going to do whatever it takes to protect Yuna, even if that means they have to like kill a Maester.
Yep.
And Wak is just like, oh man, how did I get involved in this? This sucks.
Oh man, that's great.
I loved how when they run into the room, Tidus is kind of leading the way, and he yells, "Seymour!" And Seymour says, "Please be silent, yet Lady Yuna prays to the faith." And Tidus' response is, "Make me! Make me!
Just
make me be silent."
17-year-old kid, you know?
I laughed out loud at that. That was really funny.
Oh, man. I can't remember what he says in Japanese there.
Attitude that he's got is so funny to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And then I think Tidus says to him, "I knew you were bad news the first time we met." Wait, sorry. That's not yet. That's actually...
Seymour is a little confused as to exactly...
He didn't seem to think...
I don't think he knew...
known... what was going on.
The sphere and his dad, and he was just like, "Oh, my friends, I sense that someone's going to die here, but I don't know how much you know yet." It's kind of funny.
Yeah. And once he realizes that they know what's going on, that they know about Jiskel, that's when he's like, "All right, I'm going to have to fight you guys."
Yes.
And then Yuna comes out during this conversation and reveals that she Well, I'm trying to remember. I think she says this actually after the fight's over. But she
Right,
reveals
because
here
there's a
that,
point where she reflects on it later.
yeah, she says, I'm going to stop you. I'm here to stop you. That's the reason why I agreed to like come marry you or whatever. I'm here to like stop you on Lord Jiskel's request. And that's when it sets up this big boss fight. So I didn't know if you saw this when you're fighting. You can, when you click left on the D-pad to go to the overdrive menu. In this fight, they have a talk option underneath that. So a couple of party members can talk to Seymour in this fight.
I may have seen it.
So there's a little extra dialogue you can get.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah,
instead of taking your turn to attack him, you take your turn to talk to him, and you get some back and forth dialogue.
Gotta be real comfortable. You know what's funny though? This battle isn't as hard as you'd think it would be.
Yeah.
Because you're fighting Seymour.
Right.
It's like, oh great, this is gonna be ridiculously hard, and it's like, oh, what's up with that? That actually felt a little easier than it should have, you know. And we find out why later. But
so Titus will say to him, "I knew you were bad news from the time we met," and his response is, "Oh, my sincerest apologies," very sarcastically, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's like, Seymour, he's all pissed. And then
Seymour says, "Make me."
Yes, exactly. Una says, "You may be a maester, but I will still fight." And he says to her, "Your eyes, they burn with a resolve, beautiful." So he's not really listening to what she's saying. He just thinks she's hot or whatever. And I think Waka says something to him too, like, Maester Seymour, we don't have to do this, or I don't want to do this, or something like that. Anyway, there's some options there for a little extra dialogue if you want to do that.
Interesting.
Now, when you beat his first phase, he summons Anima.
Yes.
And this was pretty intense, or it feels intense when it first happens, given like the Anima cut to the FMV earlier when it killed all
you hadn't had to deal with this directly.
Fiends, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, oh, great.
So did you get all the way? Did you allow Anima to get the overdrive built up and to go into its like overdrive mode?
On purpose.
Yes. So you could see.
So that I could talk about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's cool.
It's very cool. It's very cool. And it reveals why the name Anima is even there. I have this whole write-up about this.
Okay, so I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
I'm just going to explain what it is. So as you're fighting Anima, the Anima summons overdrive is building up on every turn, just like yours do when you fight, right? And if you don't kill it quick enough, it'll go and do like a big overdrive attack. And when that happens, your party members get like sucked into these sort of like dark portals under the floor. And it's like they go into an underworld of sorts, where there is a second part to the Anima boss underneath.
Yes.
And this is like the male half of this Aeon, right? It's very clearly like, it's got a beard and this long white hair. The top half is like a female part of this this Aeon, right? The bottom part is, and we've been talking about like this symbol, the two halves kind of thing, right? It's almost a reflection of this yin yang thing.
Yes, and how she's upside down.
In this Aeon, right? Exactly. So
this was a very well thought out design.
Long white beard, long hair. It's got kind of a crown. It looks almost like these green feathery sort of like feathers on the crown. It's got horns coming out of either side of the head, and this giant sort of cavernous mouth with these massive like razor teeth and these hollowed out eyes. And it's got its hands are chained up.
Yes,
Breaks the binds, and it just punches the balls out of you. And then there's this giant explosion. So that's more or less what it looks like. I'm excited to hear the notes that you took from.
Sweet. So Seymour uses Anima. This is the coolest thing ever. So there's a necklace around Anima that Anima wears. It looks like a saint. It looks like Virgin Mary, actually. But, well, who it is, maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. So there's 12 circles around the halo. So there's a halo around this like womanly figure that looks so medieval, right? It just looks like a depiction of Mother Mary. It represents somebody else, but it was made to look like Mary. So the idea of the Anima in Carl Jung's archetypes of the collective unconscious, right, is that the Anima would be the hidden the hidden feminine within the masculine, right? So if you've got your yin and yang symbol, right?
Yes.
You've got the little circle, right? There's the little anima within the light side, or would be over here. There's the dark circle, right? So it's like, hey, there's the anima within the archetypal male. But within the feminine, then there's the animus, right?
Yes.
And the idea, if you're just dealing with the anima, if the anima is the dominant personality, then the hidden would be the animus. Now, if the feminine's the dominant, the hidden would be the animus, right? So you would call it anima for that reason, but there's actually other reasons, right? It's not just that. So that's something we talked about a lot in Xenogears, is how the anima is kind of like the hidden feminine and the animus is the hidden masculine.
Yes.
And also it's under the shadow, the idea.
Yes.
It's within the shadow. It's like part of your shadow. It's your unknown self that you have to kind of like dig into to find, to discover.
Right.
So this is great because underneath the summon, at least what is presented for the entire somebody, is like another person, right? So there's another word though, which is anima sola, which means alone spirit, something like that in Latin, and it's a Roman Catholicism thing. It means lonely soul, and it's usually pictured as a soul in purgatory that's alone. And in purgatory, souls, it's not like horrible hellfire, but they're still bound as they're atoning for their own sins, and they're pictured as having their hands being like bound, right, with like handcuffs, basically, either like this or like this. But that's something that's part of the anima sola thing. So, right, so you're a lone, wandering, lost spirit with these chains that, when broken, mean you've repented of your sins, right? So the anima sola requires not only divine assistance, but also the help of the living, right? So you can offer prayers up to purgatory, and then that helps them to kind of break the chains and go to heaven. Now, that's just an interesting thing, right? But these both combine into one, like, seriously tortured being, right? A mother figure that's hidden and locked away in the shadow, or a father figure in that sense that's hidden, because they're both kind of change. There's a hidden masculine locked away in the shadow, behind or beneath the shadow, that's being tortured in purgatory. The more I think about it, the creepier it gets. This is the best summon. It's like super, super good.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And it's so deep, and there's just so much to it. I absolutely love it. And not only that, it just, the design is really, really cool. And you see see how tortured this soul is. And how when it shoots the missiles, its eye like bleeds and stuff. It's just like, oh my gosh.
It's messed up.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Yuna gets a new summon. I actually forgot to talk about the last one that you get in the Jose Temple, which is Ixion. Ixion is the lightning summon for this game. They did away with Ramu, I guess. For this one, right. Ramu was generally the lightning summon, but in this temple, the Macalania temple, it's icy. It's icy area. So this is Shiva. So you get Shiva, and you can kind of finish off Seymour with that summon. Anyway, pretty good fight. There's kind of 3 phases to it.
How shocking is it that he's just like, that you killed him?
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, whoops. And it's so funny because the way they're all looking around, especially as the Guado kind of walk in, and we're just like Seymour's dead. And we're just like, look, we didn't mean to kill the guy, but he was being a total jerk. And it's just so funny that we basically accidentally killed like the leader of the church. It's just hilarious.
And Trauma's just like, what happened?
And we're just like, don't worry, we'll clean everything up. Like, we'll send him. And they said, no.
Yeah, they don't let you send him.
That's send important. Him. They take him away. And so it's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so...
Aran tells Yuna to send Seymour, and then Aran walks away after he tells her to send him.
Yeah, he says send him, and then he sort of takes a few steps back. It's important to note that.
Send him quickly,
And so they don't let her send him. They kind of drag his body away.
No.
Something strange about that, right? Something not right is going on.
Yeah, something weird's up.
Attendants.
And especially how the Guado react, because Jiskel was a Guado, right? Yes. And they have the sphere. And so we try to talk to them later, like, dudes, look, we didn't mean to kill him, but still, like, look, he killed Jiskel.
Yeah.
And they don't care at all.
Trauma breaks the sphere.
He does. He breaks it right then and there. He
shatters the sphere, so he knew the whole time. So he knew
you
exactly
mean
what was
this
going on.
sphere?
And I thought it was also interesting that he says, like, Guado take care of Guado affairs. This kind of harkens back a little bit to what Waka said when you're going from the Jose temple towards the Moonflow and you meet the Ronzo along the way, and he's like not interfering with the fact that they make fun of Kimari all the time, saying,
yes.
Ronzo, take care of Ronzo problems.
So that's like a
there's sort of a
thing within the world.
sentiment in this world that like you take care of your own stuff and don't get involved in the affairs of other races. So he says that same line. I thought that was kind of interesting. But I also liked how in this temple you don't do the Cloister of Trials first to get into the place. They actually try to trap you in there, and you have to do the cloister to leave.
That's right.
It's kind of a nice
change
of pace with that. But yeah, they meet you kind of at the end of that, like figuring out the puzzles.
Yeah.
And that's when they reveal basically they knew all along. And, you know, Seymour was definitely bad news. And then they start chasing you out. You do this little run scene where you're running away.
And they're catching up to you.
And
those guys, the Guado grunts, like they look so funny.
Yeah. So you fight some battles as you're running away.
Yeah.
And you get back out to that area outside where I think where you fought the Bhed before, that Bhed machine. And there's just like almost like a lake of ice. And you're on top of that and you fight against, there's kind of another boss fight at the end of this chase sequence. It's like a Yeti-looking enemy. And he punches the ice and he sends your party falling through the ice.
That is so cool because the assumption is right below this ice is water, right? That's what I'm thinking as we're playing the game. And then it's like, no, below the ice is just air. It's just nothingness for a long ways until there is a lake, right? But it's like separated.
Yeah, and it's really far down. Really, really far down below the ice.
Yeah, really cool.
Now, Kaysen.
So it's like a shell.
Kaysen, were you aware of this YouTube channel called Dansg08?
Never heard of him. What are you talking
Never heard of him. Did you know that he made a video about this section of Final Fantasy X where you go through the ice and the fact that you're actually on Sin's back?
How would I know about this? Somebody would have had to have told me. I don't get where you're going.
I certainly am disappointed in our audience for not having told us that this treasure trove of a video online existed. I
think I know the problem.
We could have used it for a reference.
I don't think they told us enough times.
I don't think they told us enough.
I think that's the issue.
I think they didn't tell us enough times to make us aware of this. Anyways.
Shame on them.
Fortunately, despite the failing of our audience to inform us, I have contacted Dansg08.
Oh, no way.
And he's going to join us to talk about this portion. So let's give him a call real quick and get him on the line. And if you can't tell, we're obviously being sarcastic. You guys, we must have had like 100 tweets and comments and DMs. And
yes.
People definitely wanted us to see this video.
It was great because it was the perfect time because it was like 1 or 2 episodes before this moment in our podcast.
Yes.
I have to say though, having played it, I can't believe that this wasn't known.
Yeah.
It seems so clear in the game, but it just would be beyond people's imagination, I guess, that would be possible.
I'm going to talk about that a little bit when we get him online.
Okay.
But like, it's just one of those things that's common in FF10 to me, where when you know it, it seems really obvious.
Yeah.
But it's like easy to miss somehow.
Yeah, somehow.
In the course of playing the game.
But this makes me wonder what I thought when I last played the game, but I can't remember. It didn't seem that impactful. I feel like it would have been more impactful had I thought of it this way.
Well, I definitely never really looked close enough at Sin's back with the exact structures.
The city. Yeah.
Like those little ruined structures on its back.
Yeah.
To recognize them under Macalania Temple like that.
Right.
That's probably the clearest indication that there is, because it's exactly the same thing.
I know, yeah, it's crazy.
But aside from that, they talk about, Sin's nearby, and they're looking around.
Yeah, and no, Aaron even says the ground as Sin shows up.
Yes. And you see Sin, you actually see Sin. There's a shot of Sin with some water.
And the assumption is, Sin showed up from above.
Yeah,
but
from
it's
somewhere else.
No, because there's water. That means they're floating. Anyways, I had no idea.
Let's get him on the line here and talk to him a bit. Dansg08, am I saying that correctly? That's the name of the channel?
Unfortunately, that is the name of the channel, yes.
Unfortunately. That's a mistake we made early on in YouTube as well. Create a channel that no one can pronounce.
Tell me about the origins of that. How come that was the name that you ended up going with.
Yeah, so back in the day when I first really started to get obsessed with Final Fantasy X, I wanted to do a challenge related to the game, just to sort of find a new way to enjoy and play. And back then, the Dark Aeon, like the nose figure Dark Aeon challenge was pretty big in the community. And I got inspired by that, and I wanted to do it. And back then, Dark Anima had never been defeated with a nose figured party before.
Oh, really?
Never?
Yeah, and so that was like a little ambition of mine all the way back in 2008 to be the first person to ever do it. And so I thought, I thought it was such an unbelievable feat at the time that I thought I need to have video proof of this. No one's going to believe me if I just type it in a forum that I did it. So I was like, I should try and like have like a YouTube channel or something so I can record it and just show the world that I managed to do it. So Dansg08, it stands for Dark Anima Nose Figure 2008. And
there you go.
There it is.
Yep.
That makes sense. I get it now. Because I've actually been watching your videos for years, and I never really heard or knew about the origins of how the name came about. So I didn't understand where it came from. I thought maybe your name was Dan or something. But
I know, me too.
That's awesome. So how many times would you say that you've beaten Final Fantasy X?
Probably tens of times. Maybe like tens Final Fantasy X, tens of times. It's probably the best.
Final Fantasy X, tens of times.
So it's safe to say you know the game fairly well.
That's tens more times than we've been.
I discovered your channel, I think, back in 2016 or something like that, when I was doing research on some of the Ultimania stuff. My first time beating FF10 was, back when it came out. And I played it at a friend's house, and I didn't pay that close attention to it. I think he probably played some parts while I wasn't even watching, right? But the second time was when I was getting ready to do my retrospective video on it, and I was trying to grasp everything in the story. And your videos really helped me get like you said, that timeline in place, to actually see chronologically how the story actually unfolds. So if anybody has not visited Dansg08's channel, head on over there, particularly if you're a fan of Final Fantasy X. I'm sure many people who watch us already watch you. And we were just bombarded with people.
Just in the past week or two.
Trying to get us to watch the recent video you put up regarding the discovery that you had about when you fall under Macalania temple. And you fall onto Sin's back is the conclusion that you come to in the video. So I wanted to invite you on to talk a little bit about what kind of led up to you finding this out, and how you went about it, and why you were even investigating this. How did this come about?
Okay, so I think first of all, for clarity, it's not something that I figured out myself. So I want to just make sure that's clear.
Sure.
In the video as well, I mentioned it that it was a Reddit post.
There's a Reddit thread, right?
Yeah, it was a Reddit post originally, and I had just a friend of mine that I know through the channel that just sent me the link, and he's like, "Whoa, this is crazy! Did you know this?" And I was like, I had a look. Sorry, I had a look, and it was one of these things where it kind of blew my mind, but it's a really strange one, because it's like a discovery, but at the same time, it's also so obvious that it's like this fine line, right? So I wasn't sure if I even wanted to do anything with it, but when I started to share it with other people, people were like, holy shit, I didn't realize this is so cool. And it sort of created this chain reaction of, we all kind of knew and suspected that this was the case, but to have this sort of proof, I guess, that this was the case was what made it interesting for me. So I think when it comes to the Reddit post, what I found most interesting was the person who posted it, Kessler Stormblade 98. They made use of a website called noclip.com. And noclip.com is like this website where I don't know how they've built it, but it's basically they've been able to extract the maps from video games, and you have like a free roaming camera within it, and you can basically fly around the different locations of games. And Final Fantasy X was in there too. And I guess Kessler was kind of just roaming around and having a look at the maps. And there's one for the underwater, the bit where you're under the temple in Macalania. Where the party falls. And they took a screenshot which compared to how you see it presented in the game, obviously you guys remember as well, when you watch the scene, it's really misty and foggy in there. And
yes, on purpose. Yeah,
and it's icy, so you can't you can see the buildings very clearly, but you can't see, like, there's some mounds there, like you can't really fully see an image of Sin being underneath there the whole time. At least I couldn't. I mean, and because of that, I think it's this weird thing where it seems so familiar because those buildings seem reminiscent of the ones on Sin's back, but because of the way the scene's presented, I couldn't make the connection immediately that we were on Sin's back the whole time. And so through no clip, because there's none of this mist there, you can move the camera around, you can spin, you can see it, and it's 100% clear that is Sin just sitting there, and you've been having this entire sort of scene on Sin's back the whole time, and
they even like call attention to it basically. Like Waka's like, oh man, something feels weird. Can you feel the bad vibes?
Yeah, there's like a.
It's like something weird's going
says
on.
Something about that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously they call attention to the fact that Sin is near when, like, I think Aaron does when the ground starts to shake and things.
And then he says the ground.
Yeah.
He says, "Whoa, the ground," and then you see Sin, but for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, are you aware, this is the first time anyone's made that connection, right?
From what I've seen, I think it's one of these things that probably on the internet, there's been people talking about it in the past, but it probably has never
I'm sure there'll be people on that Reddit thread who are like, huh, I knew it the whole time, you dweebs. And it's like, yeah, sure you did.
Yeah, the comment section is a bit of a mix, and I get it because, like I say, it is obvious, right? It is obvious.
It's so obvious afterward. In hindsight, it's incredibly obvious.
There's something that I didn't mention in the video that I made, which I think, due to the format of the show you guys are doing, I think it's better to go into it here. I didn't want to drag the video on too much, but I think for me, the main thing that threw me off from the fact that we were on Sin's back the entire time was the editing and the positioning of the little FMV of Sin underwater.
Yes. I actually was going to ask you about this because it doesn't look like you're floating on water when they fall down.
Yes.
No.
But when it's looking up at Sin, it's looking from underneath him, and it's clearly like he's underwater. You can see like the ripples of the surface of the water. Yeah. That's what threw me off about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but for some reason, I thought he was above you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that's why I think the whole idea of people, saying that they were absolutely certain that this was the case all along. I don't really. Maybe you were, but like to me, that's why this is cool, because you get to actually see it in a different way. Because I looked at the scene again, I watched it again, and well, okay, let's assume that they were on Sin's back the whole time. They have this entire interaction, and what you can see is they're standing in water. It's very shallow water, so you can't see the texture of Sin's back. You don't know what the ground looks like, right? And so you can't make that direct connection because you know what Sin's skin kind of looks like from other scenes, and you can't tell. And so the water is shallow. We know that for a fact, that they're standing on shallow water. Then they talk about the ground shaking and Sin. So whenever I've played the game, I've always thought they fall onto some kind of underwater ancient city, something like that, remnants, because we've seen underwater ruins before. It's not the first time.
Yes, previously over the river with the shoe buff.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, so we fall somewhere like that. And then Sin was nearby, underwater somewhere, listening to the singing from the temple. Right, then Sin arrives to basically scoop them up and take them to Beacon L. So my thing was Sin was external to that situation. Sin comes in, takes them, and they go to Macalania. And obviously that little FMV of Sin being underwater after they talk about the fact that the ground is shaking, all that kind of thing. I was just like, it definitely looks to me like Sin's grabbed them and taken them to Beacon L. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So that's why I couldn't really immediately put it all together, and so it took something extra for me to really kind of cement the connection.
Yeah. For me, Sin, especially in that intro FMV for the whole game, when Sin shows up and everything just, the rules of the world just break, right? And I would have assumed that, okay, Sin's here, and now there's water above him, it seems, for some weird reason. It just looks different, and it looks striking. Yeah. But Sin makes weird things happen, so let's just go with it, right? There wasn't water there before, but Sin's here, and now it's all watery, but, whatever. It's Sin, right?
Yeah, I think for me, I ended up concluding all they needed to really do was shift the position of that FMV, and everything would have fallen into place. If that FMV was the final shot of the sequence, then it looks much more like we had this entire interaction, ground shaking, Sin's here, oh my god, and then you have the FMV, then it goes, there's a whiteout on the screen and you wake up in Beacon L. Then that's like, okay, Sin was there the whole time, it woke up, and it took them through
when the singing
to Beacon L. But because it's not edited in that way, that's why it throws people off, I think.
So here's the question then. Did Square Enix want us to know this? Or were they intentionally hiding this?
I guess depends who you ask, really, right? To all the people, to all the people that were like, "I knew this all along." Clearly, Square Enix wanted us to know, and we're just idiots because we couldn't see it, right? But
right.
Well, like the only conclusion I can come to on that, like obviously it's impossible to know in this particular case whether that was true,
right?
But there have been interviews with Nomura in other sources, like I think it was on the bonus features DVD of Final Fantasy VII Advent Children.
Oh, yeah.
Where he basically says, and I think I put this quote into my FF10 review, that they left things vague on purpose because they want fans to talk about it. They want fans discussing theories on the game. And that's kind of almost part of a marketing strategy of sorts to like get word of mouth to spread.
I would almost wonder too then if they kind of prohibited, if there was a gag order, or like if you worked on this game, you're not allowed to go into the forums and tell people what things, quote, really mean.
Like a Square Enix employee.
Employees of Square Enix,
sure.
right? Because you'd think the employees would come up and say no, yes to this or that, but I would wonder almost if they were instructed, don't participate in these, let the fans kind of do their thing.
Maybe, I don't know.
I think I'm torn because, like I say, if the FMV shifts, it seems like such an easy fix to eliminate this entire thing, and to me it still remains, it doesn't lose its cool factor if that happens. Like the scene, like the sequence I don't think diminishes if you realize that you were on Sin the whole time. So to me it's a bit of a weird one. I mean, I don't want to say it's a mistake, but it doesn't quite sit right. Like now that I've seen it in this way, I can't help but think, why didn't they just position the FMV at the end of the sequence? That's all I can really
Because it's so cool playing this again, knowing that fact, and then going through that moment. It feels more, it heightens the stakes almost. It feels way more ominous. It feels, I don't know, I like it a lot better knowing this than previously, assuming Sin just kind of shows up and whisks us away.
Yeah, another reason I really like it is because it for me, it actually gives more meaning to the conversation that Aaron and Tidus have about how Jecht used to sing that hymn in the face all the time.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you're hearing that hymn here, like this is where Jecht comes to try to calm down and get away from this ravenous instinct of sin and like find some of his humanity, right?
Yeah.
Like this is where he comes to try to not kill people, to listen to that hymn he used to sing, and that used to be part of like Xanarkin's culture, and just like get away from this trap he's in where he has to witness or be involved in somehow the massacre of the people of Spira. And, you know, Lulu tells Waka, you know, just listen to the hymn and try to calm down because he's freaking out about being a traitor to Yevon now and stuff. And, you know, Tidus talks about how he even used to hum the song, and Aaron would come listen to him so that he could remember Spira and because he missed home and things like that. So that whole scene is made more meaningful when you realize you're standing on the back of Jecht, who is listening to the hymn to try to like get away, have a reprieve in a sense from his trap of having to be involved in this massacre of the people of Spira all the time. And that's where he's coming to like relax or get away from that for a minute.
That means a lot more,
Yeah, it's just really, really cool that he is there with you. And because Tidus makes that connection, and I don't know if I wrote it down. Hold on, let me see if I wrote
it's
down
as things start moving that he kind of is like, this is when I realized that Sin really was my old man.
Hold on, we'll go through some of these notes again in a minute, but I think he says something like, the song you were listening to, I think is what he says. When Sin begins to move and Tidus realizes that he now believes that Sin is Jecht, he finally says, okay, this is true. He says the song, you were listening to it too. He says that to his father, right? And he starts to actually change his attitude toward his father at this moment. Because I think when he gets taken away to Bikanel, he says, "Oh no, there's some cutscenes." Right? He's like, it's like his father's trying to talk to him.
He shows him
little
Xanarcan.
flashes.
Shows him a few images. Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, that's not your world anymore."
Yeah.
Xanarcan, right? And then you're Sin now, right? Hey, I'm older now, because he sees a child version of himself. This is how Jecht remembers him.
Yeah, this is all Jecht's memory. And then it shows him standing before the faith.
And he says, "You want this to end? I'll find a way, promise." So Tidus is now making a promise. He's not going to just like defeat his dad. He's going to help him escape from this horror that he's having to live every day. And Tidus is making an actual genuine connection to his father for possibly the first time in his life.
Yeah.
And all of that is made way more meaningful to me when you realize Jecht is right there with them the whole time.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's really
it's
cool
really
to
good.
put that together.
Yeah,
I would almost have to say that this would be a fault of the directors for not making this more clear. I would lean in that direction because it's so much more meaningful, and so many people missed it.
Yeah.
That I would have to say that maybe they did it. They did it right. They just didn't. I feel like they could have executed a little bit better,
a little more clearly,
made it a little more clear so that it was a little more meaningful for more people.
I think one of the questions I had about this was, the way the scene plays out and with the dialogue, it almost seems like Sin is sleeping underneath them.
Oh, yeah.
And so the singing stops.
And then he moves.
And then Sin almost wakes up. So the hymns kind of put Sin to sleep. Now, is that the case? So does that mean that they just got lucky? So Wendigo, you beat Wendigo, they smack the ice. So was it just one of these classic sort of tropes where they just happened to fall on top of Sin? Or was Sin sort of floating around underneath to be near where his son is? Because he's always in the distance. He's always keeping an eye on things, really.
Yeah.
And so does Sin save them? So is he floating underneath and he comes up to break their fall? And then just
actually, that's good. I like that. I like that interpretation.
Actually, so there was a comment on an earlier video. It was right around the time of the Operation Mayhem, where they're talking about Sin always comes back for its spawn. Where someone in the comments wrote, "This is Jecht coming back for his son as well."
Gosh.
Right? It's not just Sin coming back for the
How did
spawn;
I
it's
miss
Jecht
that?
coming back for Tidus as well.
Yeah, Sin comes back for the spawn.
So that all kind of ties into that too. Is he's coming back all the time for Tidus.
I love that.
There's kind of a dual thing going on there, right? Yeah. Anyway, super cool stuff. But I wanted to ask you as well, because this is a game I've had to play now 3 or 4 times to really start to feel like I've put most of the pieces together and like actually understand it.
Yeah.
How many times did it take you before you really felt like you really understood Final Fantasy X and like put most of its sort of themes and lore and everything together?
It's probably still an ongoing process, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's the game that keeps on giving, right?
100%. I've said that countless times, and every time I feel like I'm being cheesy when I say it, but then something else happens, and I'm like, "Yep, I was right." Like it keeps on giving, and so I mean, it took a long time. I think once I started to dive into more like Ultimania and those kind of things, and just talk to more people, watch more content from people, and read more things, it just started to really come together for me, I think. And you know, the YouTube channel was such a blessing in that sense, because it forced me to take it to a new level. Because obviously once I started to have people watching the content, enjoying it, it was like, so what else can I do, you know, for the community? You know, what other information can I unearth and share with people? And it was definitely a big motivator, and it did take a long time. I think the first time I played it, it was just this sort of, I don't know, I was maybe like 13, I think, the first time I completed it. So it was like this really early teens, just haze, really. Like I just got completely sucked in and obsessed. And maybe not because I understood everything so well, but just because it just sucked me in a way that no game had ever done before. And so I can't really claim that I understood it so well, like in its entirety, like the lore and everything else. But it took years, I would say, for that to really start to settle. And it just got better and better.
I had a similar experience with Xenogears. Like, and it in a similar way, I feel like every time I play that game, I'm going to kind of see or realize something new.
I want to play it again already. Yeah. It's just such a long game.
I think a lot of these Square games around that time period, kind of that mid to late 90s and early 2000s, had that feeling where it's like they were able to somehow, in some magical lightning in a bottle way, intuitively communicate what it was saying to your heart. Even if you couldn't like put it all together
you
up
didn't
here.
know any of that exactly.
But you just felt its impact.
But it wasn't too explicit.
Yeah.
Right? But it like rode that balance between like not able to comprehend and then like easily comprehended, and they just kind of skirted that. So even if you didn't understand any of the reference material, it still meant something to you.
Yes.
Yeah, so good.
And
so good.
I mean, there are so many other examples in FF10 as well of me watching a scene again and going, oh my gosh, that's so obvious. How did I not see that? I remember on an old podcast we did, I told you about something and you went, oh my gosh. And it was like, that, it just comes together, right? When you realize that little piece, that little jigsaw piece gets put in place. I remember this. Just like falls.
I remember that.
And this was another thing kind of like that, right? It's just like when you watch the scene with the right context, it's all there.
Yes.
It's clearly all there. You just were missing one little piece of context that wasn't quite in the right place. And then once it's there, it's just, and that's a really good feeling, to feel like you can revisit something that you love over and over again, and every time you're going to kind of pull something new.
Yeah, I was going to say that's replay value, right? Because you know that there's still something valuable to be gained that you didn't gain the last time you played.
Yeah.
And it just kind of draws you back in.
Yeah.
Especially after all this time, I think that's what makes it so special as well.
I know, 20 years, man. It's been 20 years.
Yeah, it's insane. It's crazy.
I think while I have opportunity to be on, I'm going to throw one more thing at you guys about this entire scene. So I kind of said this more as a joke when I was chatting with my friends about it. So let's just say that the scene is edited in the right way, and we have this whole situation where how can Sin be underwater and the characters don't look like they're underwater, like it doesn't really fit together. But then what if they landed on some kind of husk of Sin, like a previous shell or husk of Sin?
Oh, that's
from the previous. And do we know for sure that every iteration of Sin also looked the same or not? Does it shed its shell?
Question that we've had multiple times throughout this podcast.
Kason's actually brought this up a couple times, thinking maybe Sin, each time it comes back, is like evolved or different a little bit somehow each time.
It changes somehow, yeah.
And I don't know if there's any direct evidence in the text to say that that's the case.
I haven't.
But the fact that you've brought that up, and then he was bringing this up the whole time, it's kind of like, oh, that could be. And that would be really interesting if that was what happened. You kind of fell onto some kind of like former shell that it had shed or something like that.
Yeah, that's the only way I could make it work in my head.
The only issue with that is that does every Sin have the same city on top of its head?
Yeah, right.
Well, it's
but other than that,
it's created by Yevon, I guess. So I don't see why it couldn't.
Oh, fair enough. Very good point, actually. Right? Yes, absolutely.
So it could be. I mean, I don't particularly believe the idea, but it was just interesting. I was trying to find a way to make it fit.
Well, here's a thought, though. Here's a thought. Sin is a very water-loving being. When we first see him, he shows up in this big ball of water that's like a blitzball game. Mm-hmm. Don't you feel Jecht had some influence on
how it appears?
On Sin's, at least the way he presents himself at the moment, as being sort of a fishy, water-looking whale type thing mixed with, that kind of element. Or, anyways, because we know with the Mi'hen High Road that Sin attacks land areas as well. So, was it Jecht that is keeping Sin mostly in the water?
This iteration or something.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I was trying to see if, are there any references in the way Sin looks to how Jecht looks as Braska's final end? I couldn't really see any connection, so my guess would be that it's mostly Yevon's influence over what Sin ends up being, because it's something that Yevon creates to protect what he's trying to achieve, right? So I would assume he has the most, I guess, say in what it looks like, but obviously it's completely speculation.
Yes.
Who knows?
So there's as many questions as you might answer on a playthrough of FF10. There's always more.
Way more. And then there are a few that will just never be answered.
Yeah, I probably never know. Yeah. But, man, I really appreciate you coming on. This is a pleasure to talk to you. And anybody out there watching who has not seen Dansg08's channel, go check it out. We'll put a link in the description. Is there anything you're working on right now that you're kind of excited about that people can look forward to?
I have a few Final Fantasy X ideas in the pipeline. I think one of the things I've started to prepare is just something that's a bit more kind of technical. It's a CTB kind of explanation of the game's CTB system. I think there's a lot of it that even I didn't really fully understand, despite playing it so much and doing the challenges and that kind of thing. And I really wanted to get into the sort of nuts and bolts of how it works. And so I've been kind of doing a little video on that, and I want to try and do like a definitive breakdown and explanation of how the CTB system of the game works. And that's one of the things I want to hopefully do in the future. We'll see.
Fantastic. I'm actually looking forward to that. I'm subscribed. Everyone else should be as well.
Yeah.
I'll be looking forward to that. I know it's super late where you are. I appreciate you staying up and talking to us. I think it's almost, 12:30 there.
Yeah, so no worries. It was an honor. It was great to chat to you guys as well. Enjoy. Yeah. Have a great time with the rest of it. And the community is very lucky to have you two kind of go into all of these lengths to break everything down. And just, great asset to the community. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you too, man. And we'll talk to you again soon. We'll be in touch.
Cool. Take care, guys.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
Oh, I forgot. This was the whole, going back before we actually come through and fall down on the Sin's back.
Oh, yeah.
I just put like that laughing face with the crossed eye and the capital D. I was like laughing like really hard at Yuna's explanation for what she was going to try to negotiate with Seymour. This is just utter naivety, right? And this is what Aaron was talking about back in the Macalania
when he said
forest.
that Seymour's the better negotiator.
Yes. And that she's naive to a fault and all these things. Or loyal to a fault and naive, I think is what he says. But
both.
Her plan was to negotiate that she would marry Seymour in exchange that he would turn himself in for having killed his father.
I don't understand what's wrong with that. How could this not work?
Oh my God.
Then she'll be married to a prisoner and she can go do whatever she wants.
That's just, oh man, that is a very stupid plan. I mean, I'm sorry.
It's like Seymour's like, okay, I'll do that.
I just want to marry you so bad that I'll like, whatever.
Then we can see each other from behind the bars once every month, That'd be great, yeah.
It was really funny to me. Let's see, what else did I put here? Oh, so I'll just read this note. I said, Aaron asks Yuna, so this is after Seymour's been taken away by Trauma and the other Guado. I think Aaron asks her if she's still willing to continue her pilgrimage, despite the fact that they might be the enemies of Yevon now. Like that the church might try to stop them.
Yeah.
And she agrees to that. Oh, actually, this is on Sin's back. Never mind. This is not in the temple. This is when they're on Sin's back, I think.
Right, because they're kind of deciding what to do now.
She basically wonders how they're going to be able to continue the pilgrimage if Yevon's going to be against them or if they won't allow it.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I wrote this down.
And Aaron says that it's the faith who give the power, not the church, and that they, as in the party, will defy Yevon if they have to get that power from the faith.
Which is clearly what needs to be done, but they don't like that thought.
No.
Right? That's tough. Everyone kind of has a moment of silence after that. Like, oh my gosh.
That's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
But I like how Yuna then decides that they're just going to go to Bevelle and try to explain things to Maester Micah. Yeah. It's like, we're not going to try to just right now defy Yevon.
Exactly.
Let's go try to make amends with Yevon first.
Yeah.
Let's try and see if that path is even available.
It's like a more diplomatic kind of...
Right. Yeah. Let's go talk to Maester Micah. Let's explain it to him. And maybe we can receive their blessing and continue the pilgrimage as before. And, Aaron kind of, if that's what you want to do, then, I guess we'll do that. So anyways, that's essentially where they had decided they were going to go next before Sin then transports them to Bikanel Island.
Yeah. By the way, Sin's back has tons of fireflies.
Yes.
Tons. Like all over. The whole city is just loaded with tons of fireflies.
Yeah.
I think possibly more than we've seen in the whole game up to this point.
Yeah, I think Aaron also basically confirms here that Aaron was able to get to Zanarkand because Sin transported him there.
Yeah, yep.
So Tita sort of realizes in his inner monologue that if they kill Sin, he's not going to be able to go home again.
There is no way, yeah.
And then this is when he begins to fully realize and believe that he knows Jekt is Sin. and that whole thing we talked about with Dansg08 a minute ago.
Yeah.
So I think I've gotten through all my notes of that section. Did you get through all of yours?
Let me see the top one. Yep. We are...
Up to Bicanel now.
The singing stops, then it shows sin. It's really obvious. Are we sure people didn't know this before?
It feels that way, but
I don't know how we'll ever know this in retrospect, because people will always claim to have known it before.
Yeah.
But I think Jecht, this is my last thing at the end of the memories, that I think Jecht is in front of one of the faith, one of the doors, the entrances to a faith, at the end when Titus says, yeah, I know you want this to be over, I do too, you know.
He's
I'm working on it.
Standing in front of a faith.
Jecht is like, come here, come to this faith entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so from there, Titus sort of, again, wakes up face first in the water.
Face down, and you don't know it, though.
Yeah.
Because the rendering's kind of weird.
Yeah, there's some sound effects a good way. He like
you don't see the water very well at first, but yeah, he's just kind of there, and then all of a sudden he jumps out, and you see splashes, and it's like, oh, he was underwater. Holy cow. How long had he been there?
He's in like a desert oasis, like a little pond of water in a desert, and he wakes up face first in the water again.
Yeah.
And then he says, "I forgive you this time. Be good, okay?" Talking to his father. So he's internally sort of made amends with his father at this point.
Yeah.
I think I missed that a little bit the first time I played the game. Just how kind of well we see Titus come to the realization his father was not really as abusive as he seemed to believe.
Yeah.
And that he was actually jealous of his dad, not that his dad was really that bad to him.
Right.
Now, there was somebody in the comments, I think, of this would have been 2 podcasts ago now, who says we can't let Jecht off the hook so easily as a potentially abusive parent. Right, he did talk down to him, and I don't want to downplay that necessarily, but I also do want to point out that we've really only seen these things from Titus's perspective earlier.
Exactly, that's always the thing.
It may not have actually been that way. This is just how Titus perceived it.
It's his memories.
And so it's kind of up in the air. That's one of those things where it's like, I'll just say I'm not sure. Obviously, if Jecht was, constantly talking down to Titus or something like that, then yeah, that's not a good thing. I don't want to condone that or anything like that. But I also want to just bring up the other side of it where it's like, he might not have been quite as bad as Titus was saying he was. And I think Titus is realizing that through this scene in Guadalsalam in the far plane, then here on Sin's Back, and then here in Bicanel Oasis, like, he, I think, is coming to terms with the fact that he sort of remembers it not maybe totally how it was. And it's more his jealousy than it was his father's abuse, right? But there could have been a mix of the two things.
Sure.
Certainly.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so he sort of runs out into the desert. He's sort of collecting his friends again, bringing them back together as you're fighting.
Which was very quick. At first I was like, oh great, we're going to have to go through and find like tons of people and it'll take forever. And they're all basically right there. Like it doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah. And so you collect just about everyone. When you get to Riku, I think she's the last one. She clearly knows where Yuna is at.
yeah.
But she doesn't want to say anything because the Al-Bhed have like a secret home or home base here in Bicanel that they don't want other people to know about.
Yes.
They don't want people to know where their like base of operations is at.
Yeah.
And so she makes them promise that they're not going to tell anyone about this island in exchange that she'll show them where Yuna is at. And so Waka has to make that promise. Now, the glare is like the stuff of classic meme legends here.
He just looks, yeah.
It's that look, it's such a meme at this point. It's so funny. He's just glaring at the screen.
And the camera's pretty dang close. And it's so funny. It's like, walk up, please don't murder my family. Please, I'll tell you. But you have to promise not to murder my whole family, or at least tell the assassins where we live.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to do it.
He's so mad.
But I don't know if that's really what he was thinking. He just doesn't like cooperating with the Al-Bhed.
It's an exaggeration, but the
it's not like he wants them
kind of true. Yeah.
Oh yes, there's something there in his shadow, right?
Yeah.
There's something there that wants him to just kill all the Al-Bhed, but it's like, okay, fine, he agrees.
So she decides to take them. And when they arrive, the place is on fire and it's under attack from fiends and Guado.
It's freaking crazy.
And it's like, holy crap, what's going on? Riku finds someone she knows who says in Al Bhed. Again, if you don't want to know what the Al Bhed is
it spoilery though? I can't remember.
What they say isn't, but I'm just trying to be really conscious of like people who don't want to know
read it on their own
until they find all of the primers and come back and play it on the New Game Plus. Okay. If that's you, then skip ahead, because I'm going to be every single time an Al Bhed speaks, I'm going to be basically saying what they say. Yeah. So just look at the time codes and maybe skip.
But they're not content spoilers. They're just
No, they're not content spoilers.
They're just
they're just talking to each other.
Yeah.
So just so you know, right? There's your warning.
Okay.
So what the Al Bhed guy says to her is, or she says in Al Bhed to him first, who did this to you? And he says, Yevon, Guado.
Yeah.
So that's how we know the Guado and Yevon have sort of united now, and they're attacking, they're like waging a war on the Al Bhed.
Yeah.
And Lulu says, a war between Yevon and the Al Bhed. And then Sid walks in. It's the first time we've seen Sid in the game. And he says, that's wrong. Guado, or he says Guado go for the summoner. I think that just means the Guado are here to try to get the summoner, right? Or the summoners. Riku says to him, father, question mark. So this is how we connect the fact that Sid, well, I think they say it outright later, but Sid is Riku's father, which makes Yuna Riku's cousin.
Yep, they're cousins. Yeah. So, and I don't know that they knew each other, though, growing up.
That's a good question. If they seem to, like the way they talk, because she calls her Uni. She has like a pet name for her, right? Yeah, I feel like maybe when they were young, they knew each other, but then when Yuna's mother died, they might have maybe lost contact.
Which is around when Yuna was like 6 or 7 or something, right?
So maybe they knew each other as little children.
Okay, and then... Okay.
Anyways, I'm just going to put this out there now, just in case I forget to say later. The reason why summoners are being kidnapped is because Sid is really sick and tired of this culture that sacrifices summoners for brief reprieves from sin. He thinks it's wrong. And he particularly wants to protect his niece.
Yes.
He does not want his niece to die for this anymore. He wants this cycle to end.
Right.
So that's why the Al Bhed have been kidnapping the summoners. So even going back to the Blitzball game in Luca, like the Al Bhed kidnapping Yuna was not nefarious.
Yeah, it wasn't just to win the game.
No.
There was a whole nother reason for it.
Yeah, they're just trying to keep her from being sacrificed.
Yes.
And we learn all about the summoners and how they are sacrificed to defeat sin in this section, this little sequence here,
right here
in Bikanel. So that's kind of that's what he's doing. That's his motivation here, right? So I liked how Titus tries to encourage Riku here, because she says, we have to save Uni. And he says to her, not only Yuna, right? Like indicating like it's not just Yuna, it's the Al Bhed who are being attacked. And this is probably one of the few times anyone outside of Al Bhed culture has shown any regard or concern for Al Bhed at all. So that would be a surprise to her, right?
In fact, Titus refers to Riku as his friend back on Sin's back over at Macalania.
Right, because we skipped that.
She is just like beside herself, like, friend? Do you mean it?
Yeah.
Are we really friends?
Yeah.
And you would think it's like, because Riku's talking about how, in a few years I'll be as curvy and voluptuous as Lulu,
right?
And as mature personality-wise, not just looks-wise. But, give me a few years and I'll mature. And it almost would seem like Titus kind of friend zones her, like, yeah, you're a nice friend. And she's like, she really wants to talk about how I can be like Lulu too one day. Well, it's funny because you're right, this is how the Al Bhed are treated. And for Titus to just kind of refer to her as a friend, so nonchalantly, and but to have that mean so much to her that we would think, he's telling her the fat chance, but not really. But at least it could be interpreted that way. But here with it, the way she takes it, the way she interprets it is like, wow, I can be a friend to some. We're not just a group of people with a common purpose. We're actually friends, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I guess we kind of glazed over that with the conversation with Waka back on Sin's back. where he's losing it because they're traitors to Yevon now, and he's blaming it on Riku a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like, stop. Titus is just like, stop blaming it. Riku
you
is
can't
Riku.
blame it all on her, yeah.
Anyways, they have an argument there, and then she has a conversation about wanting to be like Lulu, and
I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, even like I think Kimari gets involved in that for a second. He's like, Riku,
says,
you just be yourself, and he's like, wait, you're telling me I can't be like Lulu?
That's so funny, man. That's so funny. I love it.
Anyways, so there was some good conversations with the party there. We kind of glazed over it.
Yeah.
Because there's, I think, deeper
a lot to talk
stuff there with the whole Jekt thing, and the Hymn of the Faith and everything like that. But back to this.
Yeah, the All Bhed are just not treated as people.
No. And so she seems to be kind of pleasantly surprised by that sentiment from Titus, that he says, it's not just Yuna we're here to save. We're here to save you, the Al Bhed, right? And so she's endeared to him because of that, I think. Some more Al Bhed here. This bites. Riku, you read me? Her father's talking to her over like a radio. And he says, you go under too, I'm leveling home, and the fiend with it. So they're planning on self-destructing their little home in order to kill the fiend and like everything.
How does Yevon use fiends to fight?
Good question.
Okay, it's not really answered here, but
yeah, maybe we'll get to that later.
Just curious.
Now, Riku ends up telling Waka a little later about how Sin destroyed the island where the Al Bhed used to live.
Yeah. Yes.
Which caused them to kind of scatter and become almost nomadic.
No, this is the Jewish captivity. This is the So, the group comes on, destroys their city, scatters the people. Yet then Sid kind of gathers everyone back together, back to a new Jerusalem kind of idea. Like they come back home, they're regathered from after being scattered, right? And they have a hope, right? They can make a difference this time. But she's so upset because she's watching the new Jerusalem be destroyed, and it's like, dang it! Now they need a new. It's almost like they need a new myth now. Like they need new help. They need a new story because this one's breaking before her eyes. A new story to unite under.
That actually is going to come up again later when Waka tries to cheer her up about their home being destroyed.
That's right.
And she's so pissed.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second. But Sid, like you said, Sid was sort of the leader who brought the Al Bhed back together into a place, into a home.
Yeah.
And this is where that was at. Now, Waka allows Riku to embrace him as she sort of explains all this. And you can see that he feels some genuine sympathy for her and the Al Bhed for the first time. And he starts to feel anger towards the Guado. Like he sees, he's seeing how the Al Bhed are being massacred here or attacked.
I know, it's pretty horrific.
He cannot justify that.
Yeah.
It's like, even though he has his feelings about the Al Bhed, he cannot justify massacring them in this way. And his sympathies change and start to shift towards the Al Bhed, seeing the violence and anger towards the Guado for inflicting that suffering on the Al Bhed. It's the first time he's ever in the game been able to sort of like empathize with the Al Bhed, and it's changing his feelings about them. Really good moment there as she just grabs onto him. She doesn't have any. Crying. She doesn't have any resentment towards him for the way that he's thought about the Al Bhed or talked about the Al Bhed or talked about her. She has none of that is there, and like that sort of melts his icy shell a little bit. And he sort of like begins to realize like how at fault his thinking was about all this. So that's a really nice moment. And this is where Riku reveals that Summoner's Sanctum, in the Summoner's Sanctum, this is where Yuna's being held right now. That's where the Al Bhed are kidnapping and keeping all these summoners that they've been taking to protect them. And Titus is really confused by this. Like, protect them how?
He says that's what Guardians are for.
Yes. If Guardians do their job,
if they do it well,
or if Guardians do their job well, if the summoners don't die. If the summoners don't do their job, then who will defeat Sin? If Guardians do their job well, then summoners will be safe, right?
Yes. And so everyone just kind of leaves.
Nobody wants to put into words.
Nobody wants to say anything. I think Kimari is like, Kimari must go.
He leaves first. It's quiet. I leave now.
It's quiet. I leave now. And then, but it's so funny because it's a moment But because you don't know exactly what's going on, this means more on a second playthrough.
Yeah.
Because they go into slow-mo
Yep.
for this.
Yeah.
But it's just people walking out.
Walking out. It's really emphasizing
It's
this
very
moment
interesting.
of
Yeah.
them not being willing to confirm that Titus's idea is correct. It's a huge lie.
Yes. Yes.
Nobody wants to put words to that. Nobody
Yes.
wants to say it out loud. And
Exactly.
we've had, I don't know, at least 10 instances, I feel like up to this moment, where it's been the same thing. Anytime this gets brought up about after we defeat sin sort of thing, they have just not said anything and they walk away and they just pretend like it wasn't said. And this is like the real penultimate sort of like sequence of that, where they show in slow motion, they're just unwilling to like grapple with that idea at all.
It's almost like they're like, Yuna should tell him. I don't want to be the one to tell him, right?
In fact, Riku even mentions, didn't Yuna tell you this?
Right, yeah.
They're shocked that Yuna had not told Titus yet this.
And they continue to be shocked throughout the whole journey.
But, so as they continue on down the stairs, this is where Riku essentially reveals that, well first, because they have Isaru and Dana who are down there, so they both got kidnapped and they were brought here.
They're there.
And Isaru's little brother, I forget his name right now.
I can't remember
But he
his name.
comes running up to Titus. He's like,
What
does
does
sacrifice mean?
Yeah, what does sacrifice mean?
And it's just like, wait, what? And then Riku basically says that the final Aeon, when they summon it, is going to kill Yuna in the process of defeating Sin. That's how this whole thing works. The summoners die in the process of summoning the final Aeon.
Yeah.
This rocks Titus, because the whole time he continually brought up, well, after we defeat Sin, this.
Yeah, and he
when
says
we're
it out
all
loud.
done with this,
Yeah.
then this. And she just doesn't say anything.
He even has the memory of when he's remembering, her. His memory is the laughing scene, right, where she can whistle and then they both laugh together.
Yes.
And it's super awkward. And how he wouldn't have laughed if he knew what was actually happening. Right. But she gets him to laugh, and it's almost like she wanted someone to be genuinely laughing along her journey. And so she didn't tell him for that reason,
Right.
Anyways.
So
Very good.
He says, was I the only one who didn't know? Like, why were you hiding it? Why didn't I know? And I think Waka says we weren't hiding it, and Lulu says it was just too hard to say.
Yeah. And then he goes, but isn't she like a sister to you? And Lulu's like, yes, I tried to talk her out of it, but you know her. She does her own thing.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting line. Do you not think we tried to tell her not to be a summoner? And that's really obvious, too, when you hear it. It's like, oh, of course, her friends or the people care, but tried to tell her, don't be a summoner.
Don't be one, but if you do, I'm coming with you.
Yeah, I'm going to be your guardian
and
if you're going to do it.
That's like, I don't know, that's meaningful.
She chose this path.
Yeah.
She chose this. She knew what she was getting into. We tried to tell her not to, but we can't make her not do it.
Yeah.
So if she's going to do it, I'm going to come along and make sure that I'm there with her to the end, kind of thing. This is also why I think Lulu became more okay with the idea of Titus traveling with them. I've kind of like hinted at this thought along the way without trying to spoil it.
Yeah.
I think Lulu knew Yuna likes Titus.
Oh, sure.
And so if this is going to be her one chance at like a teen romance,
just
even if I don't like this guy that much, like she deserves the opportunity to have
before she
dies.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of that sort of thing that comes together for me in this scene.
Yeah, it's good.
So,
but it's insane because there's like fiends and summons and there's chaos all surrounding you, right?
Yeah.
So as Titus's mind world, his world is thrown into chaos because of Yuna. Then in the background you just see these like sparks falling and these monsters fighting, and it's like I don't know. It's like everything's
it's cool
breaking,
because there's some fiends come in to fight, and it's Isaru and Dana who come in and they summon. And they're fighting, and they're the ones confirming we chose this.
Yes, exactly.
Because we think it's important that Spira has a reprieve from sin. And so they're offering like another perspective on this, because Titus is like, this is wrong.
They're just like, why would you kill someone? It's like, no, you die so that sin doesn't kill 1,000,000 other people, right? It's like, I get it. It sucks. But like there is a reason for this. We're not just dying for fun.
For no reason, right? So it's a nice scene. It's a really, really good scene, actually. I think it's one of the better scenes in the game so
I liked
far.
it a lot.
And that's saying a lot. I mean, like, there's been a lot of great scenes. But on this playthrough, I really enjoyed this scene a lot. I thought it was really well executed.
Yeah, I liked it.
So after this...
So Yuna's not there, right?
Yuna's not there. Yuna has actually been taken away by the Guado who came here.
Somewhere else.
So we're going to find out about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But you're trying to escape, and you have access to this airship. This is the same one that if you earlier in the podcast skipped our... we had a spoiler warning back in like episode probably 2 or 3.
It was early.
When you go underwater, when you dive underwater with Riku from the Bhed ship at the beginning of the game, you go into that structure down there. The lights kind of turn on and everything. That was the game's airship. Was underwater. That's what the Bhed were excavating was that giant airship, and they say that in there.
She mentions it. She goes, "Hey, do you recognize this? This is what we found in the water."
Yeah. So this airship was what they were excavating way earlier on in the game. They brought it up. They've made it. They've repaired it, I guess. And so, anyways, it's pretty cool when you kind of are able to put that together. But this is the airship that they excavated earlier in the game, and so you go inside. That's where Cid is at. And they're going to escape on this airship. But Cid kind of Tidus and Cid kind of confront each other about Yuna here, because Tidus is demanding to know where Yuna is, and Cid is asking, "What are you going to do if you find her?" Right? And Tidus says he wants to apologize because he didn't know.
Yeah.
And Cid gets pissed and sort of like throws him across the room. It's like all of you freaking Guardians and Yevon people are all the same, right?
Yeah.
And he's promising that, no, I'm not going to let her die. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yes.
And so Cid tells him if he doesn't live up to that promise, then Cid's going to make him regret it. So
Yep.
Tidus is basically promising, no matter what, I'm not going to let Yuna die. She's not going to sacrifice herself. I didn't know that was the case. If I had, I never would have agreed to this. Like, it's not happening now. So that's kind of the conversation they have. And now you have access to the airship.
It looks like a Final Fantasy VIII kind of thing. The way they got that rotating and the way it's not exactly clear how it works. But as it kind of lifts up out of the ground, that's where I say it kind of resembles Macalania Temple just a little bit.
Yeah.
You see that it's kind of got a few layers to it that narrow down, and it kind of looks like a Jabba the Hutt kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it goes up and moves out, and it looks kind of like a temple.
So there's also a developer interview. I'll have to send you the link to it or something. I didn't pull it up for this. But the reason that it's colored the way it is, purple and gold, is because of the Los Angeles Lakers.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's the Lakers.
He was inspired by the Los Angeles Lakers. Kobe Bryant was his favorite basketball player.
Of course.
And so he put those colors into the airship because he watched basketball and liked the Lakers. This would have been back when the Lakers were in their first three-peat.
Yeah.
With Kobe and Shaq.
They were in the finals every year up until this game came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like 2000, 2001, 2002, and then they had a down year in 3, and then they went again in 04. Where they lost to the Pistons. But
is that when Karl Malone was?
Yes, when Gary Payton, Karl Malone, and then they were all hurt in the finals.
Yeah, because they were all too old to be playing basketball.
But yeah, the Lakers were kind of at the height of another three-peat with the Shaq and Kobe years.
Yeah.
And so he loved the Lakers, the guy who designed this airship.
Okay.
Anyways, I'll try and find the link to that for you so you can put it in if you want to.
That's pretty cool. I like
But that's why it's colored the way it is. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of Bhed here that I'm going to go through.
Okay.
Brother, who is Cid's son, Riku's sister, he's like the pilot.
Yeah. He's up front.
He's saying, "Father, ready to go." And Cid says, "Yeehaw, flight 1,000 years overdue." And brother says, "Whoa, it moves. Risk," and then Cid says, "Risk big, win big." So like they weren't sure this airship was going to work.
And he says even later on, he goes, "I'm not sure how this thing works.
Yeah,
we don't know how it's flying.
They don't know how their technology works at all."
And it's like, how you ever be on an airplane where the pilot's like, "I don't know what's going wrong here, but this thing's up by magic as far as I'm concerned."
Yeah, and then like, "Whoa, it flies." So they're actually surprised it's working. Next, we use that, whatever you say. Brother then starts to begin singing the hymn of the faith, and Cid and the other Bhed start singing it, right? As like a, sort of like a, in, what's the word I'm looking? It's like almost in respect for their home that's going to be destroyed. It's like
Titus asks, he's like, "Why are they singing?" And Riku says, "We're gonna destroy the home."
Yeah.
Like what?
And
Why?
it's like, how are you going to do that? And he says, with one of the forbidden machina.
Yes.
Then he says, ready, fire. They like fire from the airship and they like blow it up. And
I have a question though. Did they have to blow up their home? Why did they do that?
I think that
they killed a lot of fiends.
I think that they didn't want Yevon to have access to a lot of like the technology and stuff that they'd been excavating.
Sure.
Or also just to like. That is a good question.
I mean, I'm assuming
to understand like all
where
the
did Donna?
why,
is Donna on the ship? I can't remember.
Donna is on the ship. You can talk to
I
her.
can't remember that. Okay.
So they got everyone
we got
out,
them out,
but it's like I think they just didn't want outsiders to like have access to what they were working on, what they were doing.
Gotcha.
We'll learn more about Yevon's hypocrisy regarding some of their laws and rules and things later. But clearly, like at the top level, anyway. I don't want to talk about that just yet, but
I got you. Sid says that anything made with machines can just be remade. So
yes, because he's laughing. He's laughing at its destruction. He says, "Return to sand."
Return to sand.
Brother's like crying. He's like, "No need for tears. What is good about Machina is it can be built anew." You see, so all of this is being said in Al Bhed, by the way, which is why I wrote it down. So Waka tries to cheer up Riku here in possibly the dumbest way he could. He says that look at it like happy festival fireworks, yeah. And she is obviously furious about that whole sentiment. I mean, he's trying, but like,
I know, yeah.
From a place of total like, what's the word I'm looking for? Where
ignorance? Or?
Yes, ignorance.
Yeah.
A place of total ignorance about the situation because he never took the time to actually understand Al Bhed culture.
Exactly.
So he doesn't understand how important that home is to them.
Yeah.
And, so anyways, it's a really dumb thing to say, really insensitive. And she's pissed at him. But yes, now this brings up the sphere oscillo finder.
No, yes.
Technology they have
that they also don't know how it works.
They don't know how it works. That they're going to use to locate Yuna. So he's talking about how they're going to use.
They do know what it's called though.
They're going to use this sphere oscillo finder to locate her, and they're like, "How does that work?" He's like, "I have no idea." And they're like, "Then why are you using
push the button and it does
if you don't know how it works?" It's like,
I know.
Anyways, but that's the
funny.
tech they're going to use to try and find her.
Yep.
Couple of very last things here on the airship, and this is where we're going to end for today. If you've collected all the Al Bhed primers at this point, and you speak with Rin, because Rin is on the ship, the guy who owns all the Al Bhed shops that you've been going to, Titus will have a conversation with him in Al Bhed. Like they'll actually talk to each other in Al Bhed back and forth.
Only when you get everyone?
Yeah, when you get all the primers.
Cool.
So I think Rin says, I am in your debt. Oh, no. Titus says, I am in your debt to Rin. And Rin says, very good, you've learned well our tongue. And Titus says, easy once you know the trick. And then Rin says, to think the day would come that we could talk so, it's joyous indeed. And Titus says, I'm happy too. And then Rin says, here, a present to congratulate you on your success, and thank you, and he gives you an item. So that's a nice little conversation. Titus is now fluent in Al Bhed, if you've collected all the primers, so that's kind of cool.
That is pretty cool. Not very many people would have taken the time to learn the Al Bhed language, is my guess.
Right.
So
and then
flattering.
you can talk to Donna, like I was just saying. Okay. I don't know if you did this, but this is a really interesting conversation.
I was going to do it probably next
time?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to
No, it's fine. You can go ahead to your
break
point.
down the airship section so that we can be past that for the next one and just go straight into like the wedding scene.
Yeah.
But actually, there's actually a battle that happens, which we won't talk about today, but against the freaking dragon or whatever.
Yes.
We'll start there next time.
Yeah.
You talk to Donna, and she asks Titus what he would think of her if she abandons her pilgrimage. So remember how we've been talking about the whole time, the way she's dressed, that might indicate that she's not as devout.
Yes.
All these things. She's actually contemplating abandoning the pilgrimage.
Not being a summoner
She doesn't
anymore.
want to do it.
But the only thing is, it's just a big shame, right? To do
that.
Yeah.
The whole society would see her as abandoning her duty, right?
It's like, oh, great.
Of course, Titus is like, or you have an option here, but my headcanon here is Titus is like, who cares? Right? Who cares if you do that? Like, do what you want to do. Right. I wouldn't judge you for that, right? And she's surprised by that. And like, I guess you're right. Like, what's more important is what I want, not what other people think.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a nice conversation you have there. There's also a line where Waka is putting together the fact that Yuna is an Al-Bhed this whole time. He didn't know it. He's sort of despondent. He's like, wait a minute, so that means Yuna's an Al-Bhed too, doesn't it? It's like this whole time, his hatred of Al-Bhed, he's been protecting one.
You've been one of the guardians of an
Al-Bhed.
Cool. I do have a couple things.
I'm sure there's some things we skipped.
The city, right? Just the way that home looks, because well, it's gone. We don't go back there again.
Yeah.
So it looks really cool, but I looked up some notes from the artist who designed it. He said he wanted the city to look like a fruit that had burst open, right? It kind of looks like an open thing. There's 10 pillars kind of going around, and then there's a big one in the middle. It kind of looks like Midgar, if you think of it that way.
Yeah.
There's these wheels on top, so it looks like the whole thing kind of closes. It can close.
Yeah.
Now, this must have been a surprise attack, because they weren't able to do that, if it even works still. But it looks almost like a satellite or something like that, like that just kind of crashed or something.
Yeah.
It's got this big spire. And there's some letters around the side, but I can only see 2 letters, and it was A and then B in the Al-Bhed language. So I'm guessing it's just A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I don't know what the point of that is, other than to identify, okay, Tower A, Tower B, kind of thing.
Right.
And then in the middle, they've got that logo. And that logo I found fascinating because it's got a greenish background with a purple spiral that looks like their eye spiral.
Oh, right.
It's got that half, like 3/4 circle, and then it kind of goes in for like the letter G almost, but like kind of backwards. Very interesting, but it's a greenish background behind it. And so it's like...
looks a little bit like
the green eyes, and then the spiral thing within the eye. So it's like their logo is just what their eyes look like. And then behind it, there's like a sun, kind of sun rays kind of thing going around. And that's the yellow. And so the purple would be the spiral, the yellow would be the sun, but then there's like a greenish kind of thing, which is like their eyes.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting to look at and super cool. I don't know if the bursting fruit means anything necessarily.
Good question.
But I did like that quite a bit. And then I have a note here about Al-Bhed, because we don't come back to home ever again, and we may not talk about the Al-Bhed too much from this point on. So I was reading an alchemical text, not really an alchemical text, I'm not that hardcore. I was reading a Jungian book about alchemical texts.
There you go.
So it was an easy one too. It was an intro to alchemy and psychology, something like that. And I came across the word albedo,
Really?
A-L-B-E-D-O.
No way.
And it turns out albedo means white. It's just the color, like albino.
Yeah, like albino.
Yeah. So albedo means white, and it's a stage of alchemy. Alchemy's got this process. Actually, I'm going to read what I wrote down here because it's really cool. It actually explains why, this is another reason why Yevon is called Yevon and not, this is why in the Japanese it was called Ebon.
Oh,
right.
Sure. Yeah.
Now in the English they said Yevon. I think that would be a Yahweh, and I mentioned Evam. There's other reasons why in the English it's pronounced Yevon, but in the Japanese it's just Ebon, and E-B-O-N, like ebony, means black.
Black.
So you have the white
the yin and
black.
yang.
Yeah, exactly. It's a yin-yang thing. Albedo.
That's actually really interesting. So Yevon is the black and Al-Bhed is the white.
Yes.
Interesting.
I know.
Really
and it's
interesting.
almost like, it's almost like they need each other to an extent, right? You can't just completely go one way or the other. But either way, so that's it. So it's a yin yang kind of thing. So albedo has more to do with reflections than the innate color, right? So it's like white, but it's more like reflections, sparkling, shiny white kind of thing. And then Ebon is more of a state of absorbing color. So it's like it's rough. It's not like shiny. It doesn't reflect anything. It's a matte kind of black color, right? So in a very basic way, it could be said that Ebon means black and Yevon is black and Al-Bhed means white. This isn't totally accurate, but it's close enough. But the problem is that there's some racial images that are conjured up in the Western mind of 2022 that maybe isn't intended, right? So the black-white isn't intended to be a racial thing that you think of. But that may be what people think of now. It's more of a statement on what reflects light versus what absorbs it, right? So the Al-Bhed reflect light, the sun and the moon and they appear white to the eye, while Yevon absorbs light and remains opaque, dark, and colorless, right? So Jung's idea, the 4 stages of alchemy are nigredo, which, remember in Xenogears,
yes,
that thing?
They use that word,
So,
yeah.
and it's possible that nigreto means, nigredo, it means, blackening or whatever. But it probably was regret. But anyways, there's a possibility that it was referring to these 4 stages of alchemy. So it's nigredo, referring to the confronting of the shadow, right? And this is Jung's kind of interpretation of alchemy. You confront your own shadow, right? And that's something that breaks the illusion of the self. When you overcome the shadow, then that leads, the next stage of alchemy is albedo, right? Which is the discovery or the rescuing of the anima or animus, right? So integrating the anima or animus leads to the formation of a new personality, right? So you go through the shadow to find, you go through the nigredo to find the albedo. This is called, and then when you integrate the anima and animus together into, it results in the formation of a new personality, right? And this is called citrinus, which is yellow, right? It's the color of the sun. And then the final one is red. You know why the Philosopher's Stone is always red, right?
Oh.
It's always a red jewel somehow or another. In Full Metal Alchemist or in Harry Potter, it's just a red stone. Well, the final one is called rubedo, right? So the idea with citrinus, where it's yellow and it's the color of the sun, this means that reflection is no longer necessary. It emanates light itself, right? And then the final thing is rubedo, which is the complete individuated self, right? Including the persona, all acting in harmony as one self without any internal contradictions. Okay, now, it could be said that nigredo is impurity and albedo is purity, and then citrinus is light emanation, and rubedo is just truth, is everything all at once, right? So the completely integrated, whole individuated self is the Philosopher's Stone, right? It's the most transcendent ideal. So nigredo and albedo have been described as confession and illumination, right? You could think of it that way, right? So in order to confront your shadow, you have to confess, you have to admit that there is a shadow, right? You have to actually confront it and be like, hey, I've got these problems. This is my secret inner working mind. It sucks. It's stupid. I don't know how to get over it, whatever. And then the next thing is illumination, right? And then education and transformation, right? So Ebon and albedo are being referenced in this game as black and white, but also reflective of light versus absorptive of light. You may say that they're the same thing technically, but I think the differentiation is a little bit important when judging the artist's intent and messaging. And while there is a racial component to the Albed in general, I don't think the name meaning black and white is necessarily a racial one.
Oh, sure,
Yeah. And then likely the word Yevon in English referenced the concept of Avon, as they didn't call it Ebon, right? They called it Yevon. They called it a separate thing. But the Japanese word would not have referenced Avon at all. I doubt. They would have had it's not something most people even in America know. In Japan, it would be very difficult for them to connect Avon with Avum, right?
Yes.
This ancient Latin medieval concept.
Right, yeah.
But Ebon was something that it's not obvious right away, but do a little digging, and no matter where you are, you'll find that that means black. So, anyways, that's the whole spiel about alchemy and what Ebon versus albedo likely actually means, and in the concept of this game.
So it's kind of this whole process of enlightenment.
Yes, yeah.
The stages.
It's a whole kind of thing. Yeah.
So the people who are involved in Yevon,
they need to confront the shadow.
They have not confronted the shadow yet.
They need to
The Albed have.
The Albed have confronted it and have rescued the anima, but they don't know what to do with it.
They don't know what to do with it.
They don't know what to do with it.
They don't understand
They need
the
to
technology.
integrate it to become, exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
That's
really
pretty cool.
That's really
I love it.
cool.
Man. I love it. And I was just reading, because I mentioned Avon before, and I'm sure somebody mentioned in the comments that albedo maybe, but I was reading a Carl Jung book when I saw that word. And it's so funny because it reminded me, I was like, wait, I've known that word. How come I didn't realize this before? And the only reason it even stood out to me in general is because the Japanese Albed is albedo. They do have that O on the end because they don't just end a consonant.
Right, on a consonant. Yeah.
So unless it's an N or something, but it's got to be arubedo, right? So I read that and I'm just like, oh my gosh, Square Enix, man. They just freaking love Carl Jung.
They love Carl Jung, or they did at one time.
At one time, 20 years ago, they freaking
They're
loved
obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Crazy, dude. Anything else?
No, the other thing that I have is something that I'll bring up a little bit later. So.
Okay. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for this week's podcast. We appreciate you, as always.
Yep.
I always forget to bring this up at the beginning. I should do it at the beginning, but I always forget. We're really, really close to hitting our sort of like next tier or stretch goal on Patreon.
Oh, yeah, for Patreon? Nice.
For which I would bring back the Final Fantasy Friday streams. We're like right there. So if you would like to join our Patreon and support the channel and keep this podcast going, take a look at that. At the $1 level, even if you just contribute $1, you get an extra podcast every month. We do one exclusive podcast to patrons and subscribe stars per month. We've already done Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. We already did the first 5 episodes of Cowboy Bebop, the movie Arrival, and it looks like we're probably going to be doing Undertale next, the game Undertale.
Sick.
I'm still keeping an eye on that this weekend, but we're probably going to, it's in the lead now, and we're probably going to be analyzing that next week when we come back to record again. So if you'd like to get access to that extra exclusive podcast, all it takes is just a $1 contribution. At the $5 level, you get to vote on which things we cover. That includes not only the next game we cover on the public podcast, but also on the exclusive ones. And you get to ask us questions for the podcast. We do little Q&A sections. And then at the $10 level, you can join me on private streams where I do my playthroughs of these games and discuss things with you and all that. So check out our Patreon. Link is in the description as always. And,
or Subscribe Star. We do both.
Or Subscribe Star. And I'll get started on those Final Fantasy Friday streams again. What I'm thinking about doing, because I've already done 7 and I've already done 9, and we just covered Final Fantasy X here. I'm thinking maybe what I'll do is maybe just a straight playthrough of the whole series. Just start from the very beginning, FF1, and just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. Maybe skip 7 when we get to that, because I've already done that one. Maybe skip 9, because we'll probably do a podcast on 9 at some point. And then just go all the way through the series. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'll put that up to vote on Patreon when the time comes. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. We'll see you guys again next week. Peace out.